Nicole Kidman had spoken about Keith Urban before. About their love. About their struggles. About the way they'd found each other and held on. But she had never talked about this. Not in interviews. Not in profiles. Not in magazine spreads carefully curated to look intimate and yet reveal almost nothing. This was different. It happened in a small studio, late in the evening, long after the usual daytime talk shows had signed off. The lights were softer, the tone quieter, the questions less rehearsed. It was the kind of setting where people forgot about image and drifted closer to something like truth. She was 58 now. Still luminous, still instantly recognizable, but carrying a different kind of presence, less about perfection, more about peace hard-won. As she settled into the chair across from the interviewer, she could sense the familiar rhythm of another conversation about career, aging, and a balancing it all already waiting for her in the outline on his note cards. But tonight, she hadn't come just to promote a project. She had come to open a chapter she'd kept closed for a very long time. The interviewer smiled warmly. "Nicole, thank you so much for being here." "Thank you for having me," as she replied, her voice calm, almost serene. They started safely. Her new film. Her daughters. The evolution of her craft. Thoughtful answers. Light laughter. A few practiced stories. And then, as if drawn by some quiet gravity, the conversation shifted toward her personal life. It always did. No matter how many roles she played, people were still fascinated by Nicole and Keith, the rare Hollywood couple that seemed to endure. Even the air felt more attentive. "I've talked about us," as she continued, in the broad strokes. About love, support, commitment. But there's a part of our story that I've always kept close. Not because it's scandalous. Not because it's something shameful. But because it doesn't belong to me alone. Her eyes softened. It belongs to Keith. And to the family he came from. And to the family we built together. The interviewer hesitated. "Are you comfortable talking about it?" he asked gently. Nicole gave the smallest of smiles. "I think," she said, "it's finally time." She folded her hands in her lap, not to compose herself for the cameras, but to steady herself against memories. "It begins," as she said quietly, "long before I met him." People knew Keith Urban as the charming, magnetic musician with the easy smile and the guitar that seemed like an extension of his soul. They knew the songs, the awards, the stadium tours. They knew the public story of his recovery, his honesty about addiction, the way he turned pain into melody. But they did not know the weight of the family history he carried inside him. They did not know how that weight slipped silently into their marriage. They did not know how deeply it shaped the way he loved, and the way he feared love. "When I met Keith," and Nicole said, "I saw someone incredibly warm, deeply kind, and very present. But I also saw someone who had learned to carry his pain quietly." She took a breath. "And it took me years to understand why." Keith grew up in a family where love and struggle coexisted in a way that left marks. Not visible ones. Internal ones. The kind that teach you, very early, that safety can be unreliable and that stability is a fragile thing. There were things he told me, in pieces, and Nicole said. Not all at once. He adores his family, as she said firmly. Let me be clear about that. There's love there. There always was. But there was also confusion. Pain. Expectations no one knew how to carry, least of all a boy who felt things more deeply than anyone realized. It was the emotional patterns, not a single event, that formed the heart of what she was about to reveal. By the time I met him, and Nicole continued, he had already lived through so many storms. Some of them public. Some of them private. He had rebuilt himself from places most people never see. She paused, remembering. And that's the man I fell in love with. But it also meant I fell in love with someone whose definition of family had cracks in it. Cracks he didn't know he had. The interviewer leaned forward. When did you first see it? He asked. Those cracks? Nicole gave a small, thoughtful laugh. Oh, they weren't obvious, she said. Not at first. If anything, he seemed more devoted because of what he'd gone through. He was determined to make our home different. Safe. Gentle. He wanted so badly to give our girls the kind of steady ground he didn't always have. Her eyes grew distant for a moment, remembering the early years. At the beginning, as she said, it was beautiful. He poured himself into being present. Reading stories at night. Playing guitar on the floor while the girls danced around him. He had this intense, glowing kind of fatherhood. It was as if he was trying to rewrite his own childhood through theirs. But underneath that tenderness was something else. Almost like he was trying to fill up some invisible tank before walking away. If he raised his voice, even slightly, frustration slipping into his tone for a second, he would recoil from it afterward. He'd apologize to the girls, she said. Even when it wasn't necessary. He'd come to me and ask, did I sound like? And then he'd stop himself. He didn't even want to say the comparison out loud. The shocking confession she was slowly moving toward was not about scandal. It was about fear. About the way a man's unresolved history can become both a wound and a compass. For a long time, and Nicole said, I misunderstood it. I thought he just wanted to be a perfect dad. But it went deeper than that. There was a night that changed everything. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no tabloid-friendly explosions. It was quieter than that. Which made it, in some ways, even more powerful. The girls were younger then, she said. Still in that age where everything is close to the surface. One of them had a meltdown over something small. I don't even remember what it was. A broken toy. A sibling dispute. Just children being children. Keith tried to handle it. He knelt down. He spoke softly. But he was tired. He'd just come back from days on the road. His body was home. His nervous system was still catching up. At some point, and Nicole recalled, his voice rose. Not a yell. Just sharper than usual. You know that tone parents get when they're trying very hard to stay in control, but their patience is thinning. His daughter froze. Her eyes grew wide. Tears spilled over, not from the correction, but from not storming out. Not sulking. Just leaving the space, like a man who was suddenly a danger to himself. I found him a few minutes later, she said quietly, in our bedroom. Sitting on the floor. Back against the wall. Head in his hands. She sat down beside him. He didn't look at her. I can't do this, he said. Her heart seized. What do you mean? She asked. Do what? This, he said hoarsely. Be in a family. Be the head of it. Be safe. Be the person they need. She stared at him, shaken. You are, she said. You are that person. He shook his head. You don't know, he whispered. You didn't grow up in my house. His voice cracked on the word "howsy" in a way that told her this wasn't about the present at all. This was about a boy standing in the echoes of old arguments, old disappointments, old unspoken rules. That night, Nicole said, he told me things he'd never said out loud. Not to me. Not to anyone. Not the tabloid-ready version, twisted into spectacle. The real version. The one that lived in small memories. He talked about growing up watching the adults around him struggle, she said. About feeling responsible for moods he didn't cause. About trying to fix things he couldn't control. About learning, very young, that sometimes love came in the same room as tension. He wasn't blaming anyone. He wasn't condemning his family. He was grieving, she said. So this confession, he said, is about how his family history lives inside him? Yes, Nicole said. And how it seeped into our life in ways no one saw. Not on red carpets. Not in interviews. But in the way he moved through our home. In the way he second-guessed every sigh, every raised eyebrow, every moment of stress. She hesitated. And here's the part I've never said publicly, she added. Not because I wanted to protect an image, but because it felt almost too sacred to touch. The room seemed to lean closer. For a very long time, she said slowly, Keith believed he had to earn his place in our family every single day. The interviewer frowned slightly. What do you mean? He asked. Nicole's face reflected something like grief and admiration intertwined. He believed, she said, that if he ever slipped, even for a second, he'd become what he feared from his own past. That one wrong tone, one moment of unchecked frustration, one misstep, and he would no longer deserve to be the safe place he had promised to be. She looked down. He never said it like that. Not in those words. But I could see it. In the way he overcorrected. In the way he apologized for normal human reactions. In the way he sometimes pulled away from the girls when he was stressed, not because he didn't want to be with them, but because he was terrified of causing harm without meaning to. Her voice dipped. And that, she said, is the heartbreaking part. Watching someone so full of love also be so full of fear that they might ever be anything other than loving. The interviewer's tone softened. And where do you fit into that? He asked. In that dynamic? Nicole smiled faintly, with the kind of humility that only comes after a lot of self-examination. I didn't understand it at first, she said. I thought he was just sensitive. It lived in the nervous system, not in the brain. There were times when she got frustrated, too. There were days, as she admitted, when I wanted to shake him and say, "You're here. You're doing the work. Stop punishing yourself for ghosts." But that's not how healing works, is it? You can't reason someone out of a fear they learned as a child. She took a breath. And so, she said, we had to learn something together. As partners. As parents. As two people trying to break patterns we didn't fully understand. The confession she was making wasn't that Keith came from some monstrous background. It wasn't that there was a single villain in his family story. It was that love, even in a family, can be complicated. That survival strategies can linger long after they've outlived their usefulness. That a man who appears confident under stage lights can still, deep down, be a child waiting to be told, "You are safe now." That, as she said, is what I want people to understand. The shocking part isn't that he had a difficult past. Many people do. The shocking part is how quietly it lives in you, how it shapes everything you do, even the love you give. There was another night she chose to share. A softer one. a quieter one. But in some ways, even more revealing. It was years after the breakdown on the bedroom floor. They had walked through therapy, through conversations, through seasons of stress and tenderness. The girls were older now. The house felt less like something fragile and more like something lived in. One evening, Ishi said, we were at the table after dinner. The girls had gone off to do their own things. Keith and I were just sitting. Not doing anything special. Just being in the same room. I don't just think it. I know it. So do they. He nodded, but she could tell it hadn't landed yet. Not fully. Not in the way that permanently rewires a belief. So I did something I had never done before, Ishi said. She got up, walked down the hallway, and gently knocked on one daughter's door. Then the other. She asked them, without leading, just one question. If someone asked you what kind of father you have, what would you say? She remembered their answers word for word. He's funny. He makes us feel better when we're sad. He's never scary. He always comes back. He listens. Nicole returned to the table and sat down. They think you're funny, Ishi said. They feel safe. They trust you. You're not a fear in their life. You're a comfort. She watched his shoulders loosen, very slightly. It didn't fix everything, Ishi said in the interview. It's never that simple. But for the first time, I watched his image of himself as a father be challenged by something stronger than his memories, his children's reality. She paused. And that's when I realized that family healing doesn't always look like dramatic apologies and big confrontations. Sometimes, it looks like living long enough, and gently enough, and honestly enough to prove your own fear wrong. The interviewer took a moment. So, he said carefully, if you had to put it into words, what is the family confession you're sharing tonight? Nicole's eyes met his, clear and steady. That the man the world sees on stage, as she said, the man I love, the father of my children, has spent most of his life afraid of becoming someone he never actually was. How even kind, loving, self-aware people can still be haunted by things that are no longer happening. Her voice gentled. And I suppose my confession, Ishi said, is that it took me a very long time to see that. To stop just reassuring him and start really understanding him. Not as Keith Urban, my husband the musician, but as Keith, the son of a story that began before I ever walked into it. The interviewer nodded. And where are you now? He asked. Nicole smiled, small, real, warmed by something that looked a lot like gratitude. Now, Ishi said, we talk about it. We name it. We don't pretend his fears are silly or that mine are. We tell our girls that feelings don't come from nowhere. They're part of a bigger picture. We tell them about our families, not to blame, but to understand. She paused. We are not perfect, as she said. We still have hard days. We still make mistakes. But the difference now is that we don't let fear run the house in secret. We drag it into the light and say, we see you. You're not in charge anymore. She tilted her head slightly. And I think, for Keith, that's the real breakthrough. Knowing that his family story doesn't have to be his destiny. That he can honor where he came from and still choose something different for where he's going. The interviewer's voice dropped, softer now, more personal. What do you hope people hear in this? He asked. Because this is incredibly vulnerable. Nicole thought carefully. I hope, Ishi said, that someone watching who grew up in a complicated family understands that they are not broken by default. that being afraid of repeating something doesn't mean you're destined to repeat it. She took a breath. And I hope, as she added, that partners, like me, who love someone with that history, realize that the story isn't just about fixing them. It's about listening. About seeing the child behind the adult. It was the possibility that his love wouldn't be enough to protect them from him. And I've spent years gently proving to him that his love was exactly what saved us. The interviewer swallowed. And does he know, he asked, that you're talking about this tonight? Nicole smiled. Of course, she said. I wouldn't do it otherwise. And what did he say? The interviewer asked. She laughed softly. He said, tell them the truth, NIC. And make sure they know I love my family more than anything else I've ever done. Her smile deepened. Then he added, and don't make me sound too serious. I'm still fun, as she said, amused. The interviewer chuckled. And is he? He asked. Oh yes, she said. He's still fun. Still ridiculous. Still loud in the kitchen. Still turning everything into a song. But underneath that, there's a man who has done a staggering amount of emotional work to ensure that our family feels safe. And I think that's worth honoring. Even if it means pulling back the curtain a little. The interview began to wind down. There were a few more questions about her film, about life at 58, about what she hoped for the future. She answered them with the same mixture of grace and candor that had carried her through the conversation. But the moment everyone would remember was the one where Nicole Kidman, a woman known for composure and elegance, sat under studio lights and gently, bravely, told the world that even the people who look the most together can be quietly fighting to believe they deserve the families they've built. As the cameras finally cut, the red light above the lens went dark. The room exhaled. Nicole thanked the crew, hugged the interviewer, and walked out of the studio without fuss. Outside, the night air felt cool on her skin, clear and grounding. Her phone buzzed. A message from Keith. He had watched the interview live. There were no long paragraphs. No dramatic reactions. Just a single line. Thank you for telling our story kindly. I love you. She smiled at the screen, her heart settling in the place it had taken years to fully inhabit. I love you too, she typed back. And you are a good father. She slipped the phone into her bag. For the first time in a long time, she felt that an invisible circle had closed. Not with a bang, not with a headline, but with a shared understanding. That the most shocking truths about a family are often not the scandals, but the secret fours. And that sometimes, the bravest confession is simply, I was afraid of becoming what I never was.